Welcome to this explainer. Okay, if you own a home, you absolutely know that sinking feeling. Looking up and seeing a brand new water stain on the ceiling, or walking into a basement that suddenly feels squishy, right? Water is basically a homeowner's worst nightmare. So today we are pulling from detailed field reports from Reliance Water Damage Restoration Pittsburgh, and we're going to break down exactly why water intrusion in the McCandless area is a literal race against time. We'll get into the local geography, the actual science of structural drying, and why understanding this ticking clock can literally mean the difference between a minor headache and a total structural catastrophe. Let's dive in. So I want you to think about the number 60. It is a massive threshold in the water damage world. First off, 60 is the exact number of minutes it takes for a failed sump pump to completely flood a finished basement with 6 solid inches of water. I mean, think about that. In just 1 hour, an unseen mechanical failure can absolutely wreck drywall, carpets, and all your stored belongings. But on the flip side, 60 also represents the solution. Because 60 minutes is the exact emergency response time that Reliance guarantees when they deploy to properties in McCandless. They dispatch right from the North Hills, so they aren't waiting on some distant national call center, They are literally on the road in minutes to stop that clock before the destruction doubles. Well, you might be wondering, why is McCandless specifically so vulnerable to this ticking clock? It's not just bad luck, it is literally the ground beneath the houses. The whole area sits on the glaciated Allegheny Plateau, and for a homeowner, that basically means you are dealing with really clay-heavy soils. And clay, it just doesn't drain well. Instead, it aggressively traps moisture right up against your foundation. Add to that the humid continental climate we have here in Pennsylvania. When you get those unpredictable summer storms that just dump 2 inches of rain in an hour, and then you combine that with summer humidity hovering above 70%, well, the environment is just naturally working against you. It creates a massive hotspot for rapid water intrusion. And when you take that stubborn clay soil and the trapped moisture, and you combine it with the older architecture in neighborhoods like Peebles and Harts Run, you've got a perfect storm. So many of these beautiful older homes feature these classic stone foundations that were built way before modern waterproofing standards were even a thing. So when those inevitable, brutal freeze-thaw cycles of a Pennsylvania winter roll around, that trapped moisture expands and contracts. It literally forces its way right through the stone, causing inevitable seepage. The geography and the architecture together are basically rolling out the red carpet for water to get inside. Okay, so what actually happens if we miss that 60-minute window? The timeline here is honestly terrifying. At 0 hours, the intrusion hits. But standing water, it doesn't just sit there, it wicks. It actively climbs up your drywall and completely saturates your floor joists and insulation. By hour 24, that structural wicking is deeply, deeply embedded in the actual bones of the house. And by hour 48, the high ambient humidity has essentially turned that trapped moisture into a literal mold factory. It's wild. It's a rapid, frightening transformation from a simple puddle into a full-blown microbial breeding ground. Now, what's actually triggering this ticking clock? There are some very specific, hyper-local culprits we see all the time. For starters, properties sitting down in the low-lying areas near Duncan Run rely heavily on sump pumps just to manage the elevated groundwater. So when those pumps fail during heavy spring storms, basements flood incredibly fast. Then, of course, you've got the winters. When temps drop below 20 degrees, pipes hidden in exterior walls or unheated crawl spaces freeze, burst, and suddenly you've got hundreds of gallons pouring through your ceiling. We also see a lot of homes built in the 60s and 70s with aging galvanized supply lines that just silently corrode from the inside out until they suddenly burst. Oh, and finally, the township's beautiful mature trees. They have a dark side. Those root intrusions stress out older sewer laterals, which causes absolutely devastating backups during heavy rains. And that actually brings us to a super important distinction, because definitely not all water is created equal. There is a stark difference between clean water, like what you get from a ruptured supply line, and black water, which is a Category 3 sewer backup. Now, clean water absolutely requires urgent extraction, yes. But black water, that introduces harmful bacteria, viruses, and parasites directly into your living space. You absolutely cannot treat these two scenarios the same way. Black water requires a totally different, strictly regulated hazmat approach. We're talking technicians in full personal protective equipment, completely disposing of any porous materials like carpet, and using EPA-registered antimicrobial solutions under negative air pressure, all just to prevent dangerous cross-contamination. It's a major operation. Okay, I know that all that sounds incredibly stressful, right? But take a deep breath. Let's look at how the professionals actually stop this clock. Reliance uses a highly precise, science-based, 3-phase intervention. And you really cannot skip steps here. Phase 1 is emergency water extraction, basically physically removing the bulk of the threat.
Phase 2 is structural drying and dehumidification, to pull out all that hidden moisture we talked about. And Phase 3 is restoration and reconstruction, which seamlessly puts the property back together. Let's zoom in a bit on how powerful this process really is in action.
Remember earlier when we talked about a sump pump failing and dropping 6 inches of water in an hour? You were definitely not fixing that with a few old beach towels and a standard shop vac. To stop the damage, you need raw power. In Phase 1, response vehicles roll up equipped with truck-mounted extraction units that can literally pull 150 gallons of water per hour. They use these heavy, weighted wands that physically force the water out of carpet padding and subfloors. The faster you extract those hundreds of gallons, the faster you completely halt that wicking and soaking damage to the structural bones of your home. Now, Phase 2 is where the pure science really takes over, and it's governed by something called the IICRC-certified standard. This is absolutely not just pointing a box fan at a wet wall and crossing your fingers. This is psychrometrics, the actual science of air and moisture. Technicians come in with thermal imaging cameras to track exactly where water is hiding inside the walls. Then, they deploy these advanced, low-grain refrigerant dehumidifiers to specifically manipulate vapor pressure. What they are doing is literally forcing the water deep inside the pores of the wood and concrete to evaporate into the air, where it can be captured and completely removed. It's a calculated, tightly monitored process that just eliminates guesswork entirely. Of course, the second the immediate physical danger is contained, the very next thing on literally every homeowner's mind is the financial side. Will my insurance actually pay for all of this? Because water damage restoration is undeniably expensive. You've got emergency labor, highly specialized equipment running 24/7, precise scientific monitoring. So who's actually footing the bill here? Well, when you break it down, the divide is actually pretty clear. Your typical homeowner policies usually cover sudden and accidental perils, things like a burst pipe out of nowhere, a washing machine hose that suddenly ruptures, or an accidental roof leak from a bad storm. But gradual leaks that have been secretly dripping behind a wall for 6 months, generally, that's not going to be covered. What about external creek flooding from Duncan Run bursting its banks? You need a separate, specific flood policy for that. And a sewer line backup, that usually requires a special policy endorsement. The really good news, though, is that for the covered events, reputable professionals like Reliance will actually bill your insurance directly. They use calibrated moisture meters and thermal imaging to generate these super detailed industry-standard reports called Xactimate reports, which speak the exact language insurance adjusters need to approve those claims quickly. And beyond just getting the initial claim approved, there's the whole issue of the long-term value of your home. Look, a lot of people are terrified that having water damage means their house is permanently tainted, right? Like it's a huge red flag. But the truth is, proper documented remediation actually protects your home's value. Now, Pennsylvania doesn't regulate mold remediation at the state level, but sellers are legally required to disclose known issues. If you try to do a DIY fix on a flood, buyers and home inspectors are going to run for the hills. But if you hire licensed professionals who followed the strict ICRC protocols, maintained daily moisture logs, and cleared professional air quality tests, you completely change the narrative. It really all boils down to this. Proper documentation turns a negative into proof of diligent property maintenance. By relying on the actual science of water mitigation, you are providing a future appraiser or a future buyer with absolute documented proof that the property is completely safe and sound. So it leaves us with a pretty critical question. Knowing exactly how fast water wicks and how aggressively mold grows in our human climate, are you really willing to risk your home's structural integrity and its future financial value by trying to beat that 60-minute ticking clock on your own? The science makes it pretty clear. It is just not worth the risk. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay prepared out there, and we'll see you next time.